Good evening, this is Maestro Cortello with the Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today we have a 1v1 on Calderis Refinery. We have, first of all, Excalibur, the famous Sword of Legend, playing as Sindri, Trollface, Chaos Sorcerer, a really crazy hero, fights melee but has long-range functionality with Doom Bolt and teleporting. He is apparently the absolute worst hero versus the Lictor Alpha, according to Excalibur, but he's still a great guy. I love him very much. The Sorcerer, that is. Tex's opponent is NareYa, assuming I'm saying that correctly, playing as the Lictor Alpha, a stealthy hero, very powerful in melee. I don't know what else to say about them. He can flesh hook to pull a model and sometimes instantly kill them. So, I like casting. I've said many times, again and again, that I like casting 1v1s. They are a little bit slower paced, and I often like to talk a lot and elaborate on things. It's very hard in 3v3s and sometimes even 2v2s to keep up with everything that's going on, as well as talking about all the things that I want to talk about. Sometimes I often find myself using a lot of crutch words and basically just blanking out on the things that I want to say while trying to keep up with the action. Now, again, I've been wanting to do a lot more strategy-minded commentary. I know there have been a lot of times. I think that's one of the things that works about me as a commentator. I am an academic with overdeveloped analytical and verbal abilities. But there are times when I go in with that intention of really wanting to talk about strategy, and then I just blank out and just start saying, these heretics are approaching the Termagants, and they're probably going to Doom Blast. I've been watching some other channels, and by other channels I actually mean non-Dawn of War 2 channels. Two of my favorite casting channels, well, one of my favorites is the Frontline Network. It's a Company of Heroes 2 casting channel. The guys are pretty funny, and it is a very strategy-minded casting channel. Another one that I just recently discovered, another Company of Heroes channel. Wow, I like that. The suppression from the heretics to pin the Tyranids, the Termagants, in place, and then hit them with Doom Bolts, just ensuring that all those Doom Bolts hit. But as I was saying, I found a channel. It's called another Company of Heroes channel. This one is called Inverse TV. And this is just a guy who casts Company of Heroes, and he actually has a very, again, extremely strategy-minded, and he talks at a very deep level. So it's definitely something, a good role model for me, and also a great channel for you to check out if you just want to listen to a good casting channel, especially if you like Company of Heroes. So I've talked a lot about things that aren't even this game. We saw that Tex said that the Lictor Alpha is apparently really, really good against the Sorcerer, and the Sorcerer is really bad against the Lictor Alpha. I'm not entirely sure why that is. I do, of course, play the Sorcerer, but I haven't played Tyranids a lot in 1v1. When I played 1v1 ranked, there were not that many Tyranid players. Now, what I can say about the Lictor Alpha is that he is going to be extremely good at countering most of the Tier 1 units basically from Chaos as well as the Sorcerer with his infiltration. Actually, before we talk about the infiltration, first of all, if he engages the heretics, he can engage the heretics for a little while, bleeding a lot of the models off of the heretics before he has to retreat out of there. The Chaos Space Marines cannot deal with the Lictor Alpha in melee. They just don't do enough damage. The Lictor Alpha does do quite a bit of damage, and they will just start, again, bleeding models without threatening that Lictor Alpha enough. The Havoc, if they can suppress the Lictor Alpha, will be a good answer, but because the Lictor Alpha is an infiltrating hero, his first target is going to be the Havoc. Then he will get in on the Havoc. He will start bleeding those models very quickly, especially now that he has an upgraded weapon that does power melee damage of very high damage. So most of those Tier 1 power melee weapons, if you think about the Power Sword from the Force Commander and the Commissar Lord, or the Holy Brazier from the Inquisitor, or the Brazier as I like to call it, those do 50 DPS power melee. These feeder tendrils from the Lictor Alpha do 63.75 DPS power melee. Again, assuming that hasn't been changed in the Elite mod. so they will bleed models very quickly, especially from the Havocs. Pretty much once the Lictor Alpha gets in on the Havocs, either Tex will need to Doom Blast and engage with his Heretics on that Lictor Alpha pretty much immediately, and probably have to do with both of them just in order to keep that Havoc in play. And if none of those units are available, he will just have to take the Havoc out of play. And of course, these feeder tenders also restore 2% of the Lictor Alpha's health per strike. Those feeder tendrils, they attack very quickly, as you can see, so that's going to be a lot of healing for him. The Lictor Alpha can be extremely difficult to kill once he has this weapon, especially in Tier 1, before you have access to Tier 2 ranged units or Tier 2 upgrades to Tier 1 ranged units, or just Tier 2 upgrades to units in general to make them more powerful. Basically, it's very hard to just counter the Lictor himself in Tier 1, I think, with the Sorcerer. Of course, the Sorcerer himself, even with an upgraded weapon, cannot take on the Lictor Alpha basically in a fight. Once you get in Tier 2, Chaos is definitely going to have better answers for dealing with that Lictor Alpha. Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines will help to focus down the Lictor Alpha, doing a ton of damage, as well as, or you could even get Khorne Chaos Space Marines, and fully upgraded, those will beat the Lictor Alpha, even with feeder tendrils, unless he gets really lucky with special attacks. But usually, Khorne Chaos Space Marines are pretty good with special attacks as well. Now again, I said that once Chaos gets to Tier 2, they will have better answers for that Lictor Alpha. But, I mean, getting to Tier 2 is, of course, an issue. NareYa is already halfway to Tier 2. Tex has not started it yet, and he just suffered a Gen Bash. He is trying to return the favor, but he only has his Heretics up here Gen Bashing, and they're only at 6 out of 9 models. So, as you can see, their damage is not really that great right now. So Tex has been keeping the VPs, although I think part of that probably had to do with NareYa probably not being terribly concerned about the VPs and probably pushing forward to press his advantage and get the Gen Bash. So I think, yeah, and those Heretics, they only got 1 generator down. By comparison, I think NareYa got 2. I guess not that huge of a difference, but it's still, NareYa did better. And NareYa's in Tier 2. Tex needs to start Tier 2, unless he really wants to get some extra Tier 1 unit. Now, I think it's strange that Tex says well, I don't know. At least I don't fully understand it, that Tex says that the Lictor Alpha is really good against the Sorcerer. I did explain some of the reasons why I actually think that's true, but I have at least heard in the past that Chaos is good against Tyranids. But one of the things about this game is that people often complain about races, or they just say, like, oh, I think this race is the best. I think one of the things you have to consider is not just races, but the heroes. And I think certain hero combinations are more powerful than other hero combinations. And I think if you actually made a ranking of the best heroes in the game, you would actually have sort of a ranking where basically you would not have all of the races grouped up together. Like, you would not have the Chaos Lord, the Plague Champion, and the Sorcerer all grouped up together. If anything, you would have, like, basically certain hero race combinations would rank higher than the other, and you may have maybe, like, say one Orc hero combination higher up and close to other race hero combinations, while maybe say the Commando Knob would, like, the War Boss would probably rank higher than the Commando Knob or something. Now, of course, a ranking system is usually too subjective, and the Elite mod is changing too much. But I just wanted to make that point, not to just think in terms of the races, but also in terms of the heroes. The heroes are very influential. And I even often say that I think 2 of the best heroes in the game are the War Boss and the Chaos Lord. And I think those 2 will actually rank higher, are actually, at least in my opinion, are better than the hero race combinations from both of those races. Other hero race combinations from both of those races. So Tex is in Tier 2. NareYa went to Tier 2, but he hasn't actually pressed that advantage that much, and that could be part of what's going to allow Tex to get back into this game. Basically, he has not really bought anything in Tier 2. He may just be going straight to Tier 3, which could be a risk that could pay off. Ooh, that could be a dead Havoc Squad. Flesh Hook, yes, that is a dead Havoc Squad, so it's just another power of that Lictor. First of all, doing a ton of power melee damage in retreat to those Havocs, and then using that Flesh Hook once it gets out of range. And again, this Sorcerer is right here, but he's going after the Raveners, because that's where he's going to be able to bleed the Tyranids, where he will actually be useful. If he just fights this Lictor Alpha, it is a hugely losing battle, and it will not buy him anything. As this Lictor Alpha, again, with all that damage from the Feeder Tendrils, he can do a really good job of threatening to wipe that Sorcerer. And again, we see NareYa pressing that advantage, now got a full Gen Farm wipe. Tex, again, I've talked in another replay, which may or may not be uploaded before this one. I cast replays, and I don't necessarily upload them in the order that I cast them. But one of the things you have to deal with in Tier 2 is the emergence of vehicles. Now, Tex decided to use that. He decided to be the one to get a vehicle, press that advantage, force NareYa to respond, and NareYa is responding to that with a Venom Brood, the main AV unit from Tyranids, since it is ranged AV, while most of their other AV options are melee. Now, again, look at the awesome pressure that this Lictor is exerting all the way by himself, and even wipes that Sorcerer right in front of his base. So some pretty good Lictor play from NareYa. I think if you want to look at high-level Tyranid play, NareYa is a very good player. But I think as far as high-level player goes, NareYa hasn't really been out around that much. His Lictor Alpha might actually get killed now, though. And he does. So Tex at least able to return the favor. Floyd is one of the best Tyranid players around. But he largely plays the Hive Tyrant, and he probably does play the Lictor Alpha at some point too, but he is more of a Hive Tyrant player. But Tex does get that Blood Crusher, a fairly cheap Walker from Chaos, and just forcing NareYa to respond, so he does get that Venom Brood, does keep NareYa in Tier 2 a little bit longer, although he does now have enough resources to go to Tier 3. Now this Blood Crusher actually decides to just go straight for that Venom Brood. Meanwhile, double Heretics winning quite majorly over the Hormagaunts, nearly wiped them, and a well-managed engagement by Tex, and it looks like he actually will win this fight. He does need to be a little careful with his Blood Crusher extended a lot farther ahead of the rest of his army. And now, again, that Lictor Alpha is really what's helping NareYa win these fights, and Tex needs to suppress the Lictor Alpha. Because, again, most of these units, at least individually and sometimes even bunched together, will not really be able to deal with that Lictor Alpha. The Havoc is right now Tex's main answer to that Lictor Alpha, because that's going to at least allow him to control the Lictor Alpha. The main issue is trying to get that Lictor Alpha into the Havoc suppression arc, because the Lictor Alpha as an infiltration unit is just a counter to setup teams. So if NareYa is playing things correctly, that should usually be what he'll use the Lictor Alpha for. He even has the deadly jump ability, so it turns the Lictor Alpha into a jump unit, will allow him to even jump on the setup team, even if he's not infiltrated. So, wow, look at all those Chains of Torment going off. Now, I think, let's see, part of what NareYa is struggling with, first of all, he lost the Raveners. I did not even see where he lost the Raveners. He also has he only has one anti-vehicle answer to the Blood Crusher. Now, having one anti-vehicle answer to a vehicle usually isn't enough. It's certainly not enough to destroy a vehicle. It is enough to threaten a vehicle and change the way your opponent plays. Because as long as you have one anti-vehicle answer, your opponent has to at least tie up that anti-vehicle option or force it off. So, and Tex has been doing that. He's actually been using his vehicle to tie up NareYa's AV. So usually, to take out a vehicle, you usually need two sources of AV. Now, if there is any type of AV that can take out a vehicle by itself, it's usually a las cannon, since las cannons will usually snare, pin the vehicle in place, and then if support doesn't come quickly enough, if support is unavailable, or if supports just can't even tie up the las cannon fast enough, since las cannons usually do a lot of damage, that can usually be a dead vehicle. So Tex actually replaced his Havocs, probably, again, thinking somewhat in the way that I was, that most of his individual units cannot really deal with the Lictor Alpha. He is upgrading to the Mark of Tzeentch on his Chaos Space Marines. Now, I often say what a necessary upgrade I think that is. He has been managing without that, and I think it's not too bad that he managed without that, considering he was at a tech disadvantage. He did lose a lot of power, lose a lot of generators, and as much as I love the Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines, there is actually something about them that is somewhat of a novelty. They are very good as heavy infantry and super heavy infantry counters, and even just good as infantry counters. But I think Tex maybe gauged that what he needed more was a vehicle to pressure, to gain the advantage, because even with a tech disadvantage, if he can get the vehicle out, he can be at an advantage for a little while. And technically, at least in terms of army composition, right now I would actually say that Tex has the advantage, despite clearly having a tech disadvantage. And he does have to worry about this Blood Crusher getting very close to dying. Venom Brood is right here, although it is getting healed by that Worship. Now, we did see the Robes of Torment on the Sorcerer. That is also going to be something that will help very much with the Lictor Alpha. And the combination of the Havoc, the Chaos Space Marines, and the Chains of Torment will help Tex a lot to deal with that Lictor Alpha. He can use the chains, or loose the chains, as that Chaos Commentator voice says. And then he can focus down the Lictor Alpha with the Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines, suppress him with the Havoc, as well as, even if he chooses, attack the Lictor Alpha with the Blood Crusher. And we have something coming out right here, a summoning, demonic summoning or summoning circle. You don't see that global too often these days. I personally don't think it's very good, although at the same time I don't use it that very much. I would generally rather save my red for Terminators, Dark Flames to be used in combination with the Icon of Tzeentch, or sometimes even the Imperial Abyss, although lately I've been feeling more and more that the Imperial Abyss might not really be worth it. Now, problem is, Tex did manage to regain some of the advantage, putting that Blood Crusher on the field, forcing an AV response from NareYa, and NareYa didn't quite have an adequate AV response. But NareYa, since he had that tech advantage all the way from Tier 2, or all the way from Tier 1, he's actually in Tier 3 now. And now Tex is the one who needs to have an AV response to this much more threatening vehicle, this Thornback Carnifex. It actually functions very much like the Blood Crusher, in that it has a charge, and it's mainly focusing on melee, and it will certainly win quite handily against the Blood Crusher. Now again, good place from Tex. He does... Normally, you would use the Robes of Torment as a melee counter. There, he actually used it on the Venom Brood, pin them in place, and then start attacking them with the Sorcerer to threaten to take out basically to take out models on that Venom Brood, and possibly even threaten to wipe them. And that actually removed NareYa's AV from the field. As is, we have Heretic models going to die, or Heretic squad's going to die. One Heretic goes down, the other one comes very close. Maybe Tex focusing somewhere else and didn't quite see what was going on. Now, again, one of the things, that dangerous thing about the Lictor Alpha, he's so powerful, and he has these upgrades from Tier 1, those feeder tendrils from Tier 1. Tex apparently, I think he lost something else. He did lose his Blood Crusher. He did keep it in the fight against the Carnifex. And the Carnifex is actually very low on health, probably the combination of the Blood Crusher and Worship. But ultimately, if you didn't wipe the Carnifex, you didn't really get anything, because it will return to base. It will get off the field, and that will buy Tex some time. But as it is, Tex is also off the field, and with unit losses. We now have a Las Cannon Havoc, but they're getting tied up by the Rippers. So that Las Cannon Havoc, a hard AV choice. Snares for 5 seconds, has a 50% snare. And it is also very powerful, has been buffed in the Elite mod, so it does even more damage than before. Now again, getting a vehicle necessitates some kind of AV response. In this case, first it was Tex who got a vehicle, and that necessitated an AV response from NareYa. Now it's NareYa getting a vehicle necessitating an AV response from Tex. One of the ways that's now definitely returning the advantage to NareYa is that he has a very massive and massively strong vehicle in play. it forced Tex to get, or not forced, but it pressured him into getting, first of all, this Plague Marine squad, as well as getting a Havoc on his Las Cannon, a Las Cannon on his Havoc. Now, that's going to be some pretty hard AV, but that also sacrifices a lot of his anti-infantry capabilities. So he's not quite going to have as much of an anti-infantry force. Luckily, he did take out that Lictor Alpha, which is going to help Tex immensely, at least for as long as that Lictor Alpha is down. Right now, NareYa has plenty of resources. He could get another Carnifex if he chooses not to buy that Lictor Alpha, and that will probably be even harder to deal with, 2 Carnifexes.
Your forces obey you.
Although Tex at this point, he's staying in Tier 2. And I think he may have to. Going to Tier 3 may not be an option. He doesn't have the power. He's been losing too many power farms.
Your units fulfill your command.
So and he needs to also just get units. He needs units. And it's actually going to be really amazing to see what. Oh wow, Dark Flames. Wow, I think that was Dark Flames combined with, or Doombolts combined with Dark Flames, and probably just the combination of that just did enough damage to force off all of the Termagants and the Hormagaunts. So very smart play. Dark Flames by itself is not that great of a global these days. Best used in combination with the Icon of Tzeentch, but Tex used it there, probably, and I mean, at this point, it's just, he's got to use what he has, and he has a ton of red. He needs to use it for something. And Dark Flames, although I don't think it's that great, it's probably still at least better than the Summoning Circle. And at least this is a race where the Dark Flames will be a little bit better than against most races. Certainly, Dark Flames right now against Space Marines is not even worth it. At least against Tyranids with those really squishy Termagants and Hormagaunts, although maybe not quite as squishy with Synapse. The Dark Flames will be a little bit better against them. So Tex doing quite a miraculous job to stay in this game. A Tyranno formation went off, but I don't feel like it did a whole lot. And now Tex is destroying the Capillary Towers, going to get that red. And NareYa even crushes one of his own Capillary Towers with his Thornback Carnifex, charging out of there, possibly running back to base to heal up. But Tex is getting that second Carnifex. I mean, not Tex. NareYa is getting that second Carnifex. Tex maybe he can imagine what's coming. I mean, certainly, basically once Tyranid players are in Tier 3, you're usually going to expect them to get a lot of those super units. Now, I consider the Carnifex a super unit. Could just be semantics, but I mean, it's very expensive, very powerful. Very good. And the thing about the Carnifex is that they're only limited by your pop cap and your resources. You can get, otherwise you can get as many as you want. Right now, obviously, we see NareYa getting a second Carnifex. Getting 2 Carnifexes is not uncommon at all. And if you had Tyranid players, I think if you have a Tyranid player losing most of their army, it might not even be that uncommon for them to get a third Carnifex. Although certainly getting that many of these vehicle super units will limit your capping ability, so that is one of the disadvantages to doing that. Maybe get a second Carnifex and a Lictor or something if you lose one of those Termagants or Hormagaunts, especially if you lose Hormagaunts. Excuse me, a little sick. Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines level 4. Now, because they are so powerful and so killy, they will definitely take a lot of models off of those Termagants, as well as those Hormagaunts whenever they shoot at them. The Termagants are getting buffed, though, because they have the range synapse from the Venom Brood, increasing their damage by 35%. I haven't done the math on that to figure out roughly what the damage is for, first, the 45% increase from the Toxin Sacs, as well as the 35% from the range synapse. But, I mean, it's pretty good. The Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines will definitely be better. Another Dark Flames. That one seems like it missed a little. Still doing some damage. And I actually think NareYa is retreating a bit unnecessarily, and that could actually be something, well, not retreating, but backpedaling unnecessarily. I mean, if you notice, he's not actually losing that much health from those Dark Flames. Certainly not the Dark Flames by itself. So I think he should actually just press forward, press through it. I mean, certainly these Carnifex is not going to be threatened at all. And then, I mean, the Venom Brood can at least tank the damage from those, I think, from the Dark Flames for a little while. But the Venom Brood will not do a good job of tanking the damage from those Bloodletters from the Summoning Circle. So that actually is one of the things that is doing well about that Summoning Circle. So double Carnifex is in here, tying up. Ooh, all right. So Tex just got both of his Plague Marine squads knocked back by a special attack from this Thornback Carnifex. Double Thornback Carnifexes. Now, NareYa could make the choice to get... He could have made the choice to get different types of Carnifexes. He could have had one Thornback, another as a Barbed Strangler or a Venom Cannon, and that could have been a good choice. Getting the double Thornback, though, does make it a lot harder to take out these Carnifexes because they will have an extra 525 health. And they will also be able to charge out of danger. That being said, this Carnifex is done. One more rocket will take out this Thornback Carnifex. So one Carnifex down. The second one, maybe a little out of position. Actually, I don't know. Not doing too bad. Sorcerer will go down, though. Yeah, that's a dead Sorcerer, sadly. And these Plague Marines staying in play for a very long time, losing a lot of models, and both of them down to one model. And still one Carnifex on the field. So quite a battle. And Tech's actually going for another Plague Marine squad. Now those Plague Marine squads, now I've said before that basically the limitations of the Plague Marines, not really having great anti-infantry damage, so they're not really good at dealing with infantry units. They can tie up, though. They are durable. They do make a good meat shield. So even if they aren't killing infantry units, they can be used to tie up. I personally prioritize capping with Plague Marines over tying up, just because you need something to capture. And if you don't have a vehicle, the Plague Marines will generally contribute the least to combat. Now, triple Plague Marines, well, going to be helpful now, especially now that NareYa only has one Carnifex. So this triple Plague Marine build, I've actually seen triple Plague Marines before, and it actually seems to be almost counterintuitively not that bad, because you're spamming a primarily AV unit. Spamming a primarily AV unit that is by itself not actually that strong as AV, but many of them combined will snare as well as do damage. And then with multiple of them, you can actually have one cap, the others fight, vehicles die. You actually have 3 units that can tie up, and they also just act as a meat shield, a very tough meat shield that's very tough to force off. So now it's now a 2-cap for NareYa. But Tech's doing brilliantly. So this Carnifex, I think, almost level 3. NareYa's choosing to keep it in play, and a lot of Rippers on the field, too. Ooh, and that Havoc model gets flesh took by the Lictor Alpha, now has the Lone Hunter. That's one of the other things that can make the Lictor Alpha extremely powerful. Basically just gives him a damage buff as well as a damage reduction buff when he's not in range of other Tyranid units. And it actually makes him extremely powerful, especially with an upgraded weapon. Those Termagants dying in droves. And now NareYa had a 2-cap. Tex is actually about to get a 2-cap back, and he's also putting up a Zine Shrine. Zine Shrines are something that I have not used a whole lot. They spit out Doom Bolts. That's what I know about them. And now it actually looks like NareYa could lose this Carnifex. And I mean, if he loses the Carnifex, that will actually probably be the game in favor of Tex. Oh man, I actually think Tex should push forward just a little bit more. Oh, so he does not get that Carnifex, certainly gets it very close. I think if he had just pressed it a little bit more, kept all three of those in, he may have been able to get one more rocket off and kill that Carnifex. As it is, though, I mean, NareYa is running out of VPs, so even without killing that Carnifex, this looks like it could be the game for Tex. Spore Mines dropped right here to basically just suppress that blob. The Spore Mine call-in, I've been noticing, is pretty good for when your opponent blobs up too much, since it will punish them for that. One of the things I can tell about this Chaos Shrine of Tzeentch is that if it actually starts shooting its Doom Bolts, it will do very well against the Hormagaunts and the Termagants and even the Venom Brood. So it actually basically sounds like a turret, and we're talking about a plasma turret, since Doom Bolts do plasma damage. And that's the game for Texcalibur. It's counting down, and it's... And this Lictor Alpha is just here. It's just his last stand. And there we go. GG. Quite a GG. I think it was very interesting how NareYa went to Tier 3 and did the Tier 3 spam of Tyranids, getting 2 Carnifexes. Tex answers back with Tier 2 spam. Plague Marines. Plague Marines. Apparently a lot better than I think they are. And he won the game despite quite a tech disadvantage. And not even going to Tier 3. One of the things I really liked was that he had a ton of red, and he just started using those Tier 2 globals. I mean, he obviously couldn't use Imperial Abyss, he could not get Chaos Terminators, so he just used what he had. And he was using that in a lot of engagements, and was making a difference in those engagements. And I think one of the things that worked was not just the actual effect of those globals, but also the psychological effect. Basically, NareYa at times backpedaling unnecessarily, just because he's actually getting a little scared of the Dark Flames, even when it's not actually doing that well. And that's buying Tex time to win the game. So, very interesting. Hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.